Welcome to the Coach May Show. We winning! And do not apologize for it. Confidence, composure, class. The setback leads to the...
Hey guys, welcome back to Win, the Coach May Show. Man, I've had a great week. I've been with two teams in Kentucky, two high school basketball teams, and I am engaged with them now and helping their program win at a higher level. We had discovery meetings with their coaching staffs, and we've got an engagement for the next year of helping their players and their coaches and their program in general not only become mentally tougher, but understand how winning is done at a high level. Part of those conversations are going to be the difference between, or I should say, what is the difference, and learning the difference between consistency and intensity. So before we dive into that today, I want to remind everybody that if you are part of a program, whether it's an athletic team, a sales team, a corporate team, a church leadership team, and you think that your culture, if you will, needs some tweaking, then go to CoachMays.com, check out the website, check out how we work and how we operate, and give me a call, 859-536-7295. You can email me at jason@coachmays.com. And let's get on a 15-minute discovery call, and I can tell you more about our team coaching. But let's dive into the differences between consistency and intensity. So, regardless what you do in life, whether you're in athletics, whether you're a coach, whether you're an athlete, whether you're in business, whether you're a minister, whether you are a recreational marathon runner, if you're like me, you're a plotter, whether you're a Peloton rider, whatever it is you're doing, you're going to have to understand the difference between consistency and intensity. Both are needed to win. Both are needed sometimes in unison together. However, most of the time, we need to understand when to use one over the other. So let's start with consistency. If I was to rank which is one, which is two, I would say consistency is one and intensity is two. Consistency is when you show up regularly, reliably, faithfully, usually daily, in regards to your effort. You're steady, your actions are repeatable, and there's going to be days where that session, that practice, that run, that seminar, that meeting wasn't your best. On a scale of 1 to 10, it might have been an 8. It might have been a 7. But if you're consistently getting 7 or 8s, you're going to be stronger in the long run. Let me give you an example. I would rather have a basketball team. Many of you know I'm a basketball coach. I've also coached for 29 years. I would rather have a team that practices on a scale of 1 to 10 from an effectiveness and an efficiency standpoint, an 8 most of the days, rather than a 10 here, a 9 here, and then a 4 here, a 3 here, a 5 here, an 8, a 2. I'd rather have 7s and 8s because that's going to build a resilient team over the course of time. Now, some of you may be saying, why wouldn't you want to try to have a 10 every day? Because it's impossible. We're humans, created by God, and although we were designed and created to be excellent. There's so much more in our tank that we can pull out of ourselves. That's why we have the company called Cognitecture, mental architecture for how you think. There's so much more we can pull out of our cognitive abilities, but as human beings, whether it's because of our own frailties, our own sin, our own laziness, whatever it be, complacency, we fail to do that. So I hate to say it's impossible, but if we're being real, it is impossible for us to be a 10 out of 10 in everything we do at every time we do it. So I always would strive for my teams to be an 8 out of 10. I was good with that. Matter of fact, we always would debrief practice after a practice with our staff. And I would say, on a scale 1 to 10, what are we? And they would say their number. They would explain their number. That gave me some feedback of what level that practice was at from a consistency standpoint, and I would put it in perspective to how we'd been practicing the week and the 2 week and the month prior to that, okay? The team that I had at Ashland in 2019 and 2020, not 1920, I'm not that old, was undefeated, 33-0. First team since 1948 in high school basketball in Kentucky to do so. Every day was an 8 or a 9 with that bunch, but they were uncommon. They never lost a game. But they didn't have 10s every day. There were a few 6s in there, but we had 8 to 10, 8 or 9 practices every day. That team was consistent. So whatever it is in your pursuit of excellence, strive for that daily routine, that daily rigor, and be faithful in the small components that comprise that daily routine, and you'll be more consistent. Intensity, however, is all about extreme effort. We're talking that 10 level, 10 out of 10 effort, those high bursts, that explosiveness action, or rather I should say that explosive action, that max power, where you just exhaust yourselves in whatever it is that you're doing. It could be a high-intensity training workout. It could be studying for a final exam, I remember when I was a financial advisor, I was studying for the securities exam and cramming for those, just cramming for a test or cramming for a presentation where you just are staying up late and you're just, down on caffeine and you're just trying to get it all done, trying to be as sharp as you can. It just have those short bursts of intense effort, okay? Those can be good. Those are needed, but they're hard to sustain. So the core difference is consistency will build your system. It builds your infrastructure. It builds your habits. It builds your resiliency. It builds, I think, your toughness. If discipline is doing the things you know you need to do even when you don't feel like doing it, you have to have consistent habits in place in order to execute that discipline. Intensity, however, it stresses that infrastructure. It stresses the system that consistency builds. So again, consistency will build your system, but intensity will stress that system. It will create some breakthroughs. It will allow you to level up, and then you'll have to find consistent behavior at that new level. That's how winning's done. But it's important that you understand that without the system, without the consistency, you'll have burnout and you'll have crashes. So consistency, ladies and gentlemen, builds habits via repetition. I've told my teams over the years the key to mastery is repetition. My daughter, she has her driver's permit. She is faithful in logging her hours that the state of Kentucky requires. And when you go back to get your, I think it's called your intermediate license, where you're allowed to drive without the supervision that's required for a permit driver. And she's getting better the more hours that she logs. Now she's far away from becoming far away from mastering her ability to drive. but it's the repetitions that's allowing her to improve and gain confidence. So consistency, you are building habits. You're laying brick by brick foundation through repetition. Consistency will reduce decision fatigue. It allows for daily improvements to compound. The miracle of compounding interest is something we're going to do a separate episode on. I've always done financial literacy leadership sessions for our basketball teams over the years. Every team I've ever coached has understood the value of the miracle of compounding interest, of what a Roth IRA is, what a traditional IRA is, what life insurance is, what annuities are, what the S&P 500 and what index funds are. I want these kids, it's really cool now to see them investing their own money as they're in college and graduating college and shooting me text messages with their statements saying, hey, coach, I just want to appreciate you having those talks with us. Well, it all started with proving to them that if they can compound something, whether it's money, whether it's habits, daily discipline, that is where true strength is built. Consistency, at its very core, the power of it is that it compounds over time. And that's what builds resolute strength. Whereas if it's just pure intensity and short bursts, hyperactivity, if you will, you may have a short-term positive return, a short-term return on that short-term investment, but it will diminish over time. However, intensity does have value, as we mentioned earlier. If you can have moments where you are deliberate in your short bursts of hyperactivity, where you are intensely focused, you have a clear short-term goal, where you know what your immediate feedback needs to be from that short duration of high intensity, okay? You're going to see short-term growth. And then it's your job to capture that short-term growth, that short-term improvement, and then establish a new level of which to build your consistent habits on. So in order to level up, you need intense moments. And then you need the long-term consistent driving behaviors to sustain that new level. And then once you start to plateau, as we call mental performance, then have another intense training session, have another intense practice, have another intense mental workout. Try a different form of meditation, try fasting, try a different form of exercise. Whatever it is you're doing, get to that next level, then build more consistent behaviors at that new level. So in a sense, it's a staircase, but the stairs should be wider. You go up with intense behaviors and workouts, whatever it be, and then you sustain with consistent behavior. Then you go up again with intensity, sustain with consistency. Go up again with intensity and sustain with consistency. However, there's a trap in this. The high intensity, low intensity. The high consistency, low consistency. The binging, the hyper productive week versus the lower productive weeks. It can create crashes. It can create frustration. It can create some chaos, which is why I think we go back to what we said in the beginning. Consistency prevents this. It should be the most important of the two. The intensity is needed, but you can't rely on the intensity. It's not meant to sustain for a period of time. The consistency is. So how do these two work together? What's the synergy, if you will? Consistency without intensity will allow you to plateau. And so what happens is your progress curve flattens. And we don't want that. We always want to be have an upward trajectory in our progress. But so you have to have the intensity. But intensity without consistency will have short-term spikes and then it'll regress. Short-term spikes, and then it will regress. And so we've got to balance the two. And I think the Pareto principle is pertinent here. The Pareto principle is it's an old principle that I think rings true. It's 80% of your results will come from 20% of your efforts. 80% of your results will come from 20% of your talent. If you're leading a sales team in the business world, 80% of your profits and results and sales activity are probably coming from the top 20 sales producers. If you're a basketball coach, if you're a football coach, if you're a softball coach, 80% of your run production, if you're a baseball coach, 80% of your pass completions or touchdown production, if you're a football coach, it's probably coming from 20% of your best athletes. 80% of our offense as a basketball coach is usually coming from 20%, maybe 25% of our players. Okay? And so the Pareto principle is applicable here. I would have about 75 to 80% of my pursuit of excellence, of winning, focused on consistent behaviors. And then I would have 20 to 25% laced in with intense efforts. That's how I would blend the two. So I enjoyed having this conversation with you, exploring the differences between consistent effort and intense effort. Consistency and intensity. They have to coexist. I would focus on consistency first, but understand the value of those intense moments. Thank you for joining us on Win, the Coach May Show. I hope what you heard today will allow you to win in your life. Don't feel you ever have to apologize for it if your effort is honest. Go be great. I love you guys. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, this is where winning is done.
We win it. And do not apologize for it.